Hello, it's me, Guy, Mr. Dude. It's almost the new year, but I wanted to end this year on a very positive note in which I rant about game reviews. Not specifically about intravenous, but just game reviews in general. And maybe not specifically game reviews, but like criticism or critique or whatever you want to call it. So I tried to make this video yesterday, but I just ended up ranting a lot instead of saying something cohesive, going on tangents and stuff. So I'll try my best to be on point and, coherent and cohesive today. I believe that game critique or criticism or whatever is kind of cringe from the perspective of a game developer because unless a game has some serious flaws with it which desperately need fixing, most of the criticism that people come up with is never going to be incorporated into the game, or it's not the type of changes that are going to be incorporated into the game that has already been released. There's a reason why sequels try to improve on the previous entry in the series, and that's because it's much easier to incorporate all sorts of good changes into the next game instead of basically fixing what was done in the previous game. You learn from the previous game, you take into consideration all the things that you yourself noticed after release, and you take into consideration feedback from people that have played the game, and then you try to fix it in the next game. In my opinion, that's the optimal way to improve upon a game, regardless of how many flaws it has and regardless of whether or not these flaws can be fixed in an update or not. And the reason why I believe like critique or criticism is cringe is because a lot of game reviewers, when they try to criticize your game, they try to put on this facade of knowing exactly what your game needs to do in order to fix something. And a lot of it goes over their own heads when they even talk about these things, because first of all, what they're suggesting, you have to realize that developers spend years on their games and they put thousands of hours into their games. So it's very likely that the things that they're suggesting that would fix the game, these are things that most likely were already considered and maybe even tested internally by the developers before the game even came out. So in other words, when somebody suggests like, just do this one simple thing and the game's going to be fixed, you have to understand that their understanding of a game is like this. It's very narrow, right? You might spend in the game, for example, 50 hours playing it. I, for example, can spend up to fucking 8,000 hours making it. So the assumption that something that seems so simple and obvious to you is something that the developers did not already consider is very arrogant. Because game design and game development is such an iterative process where you try many different things, you cut out the fat, you settle on things that work, and you try to make them better and better. So again, it's very arrogant to assume that somebody who has worked on a game for thousands of hours did not consider what you're about to suggest. And to be clear, I'm not talking about critique or criticism in regards to my game, right? I'm talking about critique or criticism in regards to other games. I used to watch a lot of these game reviews on YouTube, and when people will try to have these like smart ass takes on how to supposedly fix some fatal flaw as per the words of the person who is making the review, it always, now it seems very arrogant to me because I know what the process is like of making a game. And so when somebody suggests this one simple trick to fix the game, I'm just, most likely the thing that you're suggesting was already considered, deemed unfit for the game, and not implemented because it either discounted other parts of the game or it was contrary to the experience the developers intended to make with the game. And that's another very important thing. The vision for the experience that the developers have can be wildly different from what you expect of the game, and that's another very important thing to consider. What you expect from a game is not necessarily what the developer is trying to do. It's possible to completely misinterpret the point of the gameplay. It's possible to completely misinterpret the way the game is supposed to be played. And if you view the game through that lens of misinterpreting how it's meant to be played, well, you have no choice but to arrive at the wrong conclusion. I've had this happen with Intravenous 1, where people tried playing it as Hotline Miami and ended up having a bad time. And the reason why they had a bad time is because Intravenous is not made to be like Hotline Miami. I've never played it. So they set themselves up to have a bad time and blamed it on me. Meanwhile, what I tried to make was a love letter to Splinter Cell and all the other games from my childhood, like Jagged Alliance and various shooters like Battlefield and whatnot. So game critique or criticism becomes extremely cringe when the person reviewing it, especially if it's on YouTube, when they try to present their subjective understanding of the game as an objective fact. That is also a very arrogant thing to do because you did not spend thousands of hours on the game, right? You do not know what went on in the head of the developer, and you most certainly do not know what the intent of the developer was. To claim with confidence and with certainty that this is exactly what the game is like, and this is how you should interpret it, is very arrogant and reeks of amateur hour, like wannabe game designer stuff. I don't watch game reviews for that very reason because, for example, as somebody who makes games, right, I notice patterns that other people don't in game design in other games, right? And so I am able to sometimes glean into what the developer intended, into how various systems are, meant to work and intertwine together. And so I have a slightly deeper understanding of many games simply because I have experience in actually making them. And there have been many cases where I would watch a review and they would say that this is how the game does this and that, or this is how this system works, and I'm sitting there being like, dude, that's completely fucking wrong. But the person making the review, they don't know that, but they're still trying to present it as like an objective fact. And that's the point where it becomes extremely cringe. It's this arrogance, this assumption that you know what you're talking about. Meanwhile, you didn't spend even a fraction of the time that the developer spent, working on their game. So it's healthy to assume that most of the things which seem obvious to you as obvious fixes to certain problems the game might have are things that the developers already internally considered and maybe even tested throughout the game's development before you even came up with that idea and before you even played the game. And that's because, like I said earlier in the video, that's because the process of making a game is very, very, very iterative. You iterate over on the same thing many times until you arrive at the final version of it. And that's how games are made. That isn't to say that games cannot have flaws in their game design. That's true. But the chances that your supposed solution to a problem that a game supposedly has was not already considered internally and even tested are very, very low. There are many things which people suggested I fix certain elements of Intravenous 2 and Intravenous 1 even before it was released through adding certain features that were already considered and deemed unfit for integrating into the game because they would, for example, discount other parts of the game by making it overpowered in relation to other mechanics, right? And yeah, so those features were, for example, considered before the games even came out, before people played them, before people suggested them, before people even considered that, oh, hey, maybe this would be a good addition. A lot of features have already gone through that funnel. So again, when you try to criticize a game and you think you understand how it works, just consider for a moment that, if you spent 50 hours playing it, the developers spent several thousands of hours making and playing it. Which means that your supposed solutions to problems that you, for example, consider to be problems are things that the developers are most likely aware of, and they decided to either not touch it or to balance it in some other way, because the alternative to that would be completely screwing up the balance. If your game does a lot of things and you want all parts of it to feel equally good, it's a very precise thing, and it requires a lot of playing, a lot of iteration, and a lot of testing. And simply suggesting that, oh, you can fix this by just doing this one thing, incredibly arrogant and reeks of lack of experience in game design. Which again, I don't blame people for it, because people that don't make games don't have this perspective, and as such, it's not their fault that they think they know better. But just have a little bit of humility and understand that these things, they might have already been considered by the developers themselves. Thanks for watching. See you next time, and wish you a happy new year. I hope 2024 was good and 2025 is going to be even better. See ya.